Well, this one's been a little long in the making. However, if you are looking for a comprehensive overview of all of the various generic jobs in Final Fantasy Tactics, the Ivalice Chronicles, now or into the far future, you've come to the right place. We're talking growth rates, we're talking equipment, we're talking loadouts, general stat spreads, all the things that you need to know to make the most of these powerful jobs. My name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman, and welcome back to the channel. Hello everyone, if you enjoy what I do, including ongoing coverage and guides about all of your favorite turn-based tactics titles, including, of course, the greatest of all time, Final Fantasy Tactics, now newly updated with the Ivalice Chronicles, then a like on this video and a subscription to the channel would be very much appreciated. Thank you so much. So what is it that we're doing today? Well, similar to all of the other class and job overviews that we've done for various different games over the years, we're going to be going through and discussing each of the generic jobs in FFT. These are not going to be job-specific deep dives or anything. We're going to be discussing more the general use case, how you're most likely going to be putting these jobs to use on the battlefield, and what you need to know about them in terms of how they actually function. To do that, we of course need to talk about stats, as one would expect from any sort of tactics title, and we need to couch that discussion a little bit. If you want to jump right to the discussion of the jobs themselves, there are of course timestamps in the video description and on the play bar, but I think this is an important conversation to have really quick, so let's do it. Stats and growth rates are obviously an intrinsic part of many, not all, but many turn-based tactics and strategy titles, and FFT is in a way no different. However, compared to things like, say, Fire Emblem, where a unit's specific growth rates combined with a class's specific growth rates will have a massive impact on whether the unit is even functional once you've leveled them up enough, FFT is much more focused on base stats and gear. Jobs do have growth rates, however, unless you're in the small minority of people that is doing level up and down tricks to absolutely min-max your stats, something that you will never once need to do for any of the content in the game, even on Tactician difficulty, you're never really going to be concerned with what your growth rates are. Generally speaking, so long as you have a particular type of role for a character, say a melee frontline bruiser, so long as you're leveling through the jobs that fill that role, your stats are going to be perfectly fine. Can you eke out a little bit of extra strength by level 99 if you stick in Monk the entire time rather than being in Knight and then in Thief and Geomancer and getting more of a spread that way? Yes. However, it is absolutely not necessary to find success in the game. Will you be hamstringing yourself a little bit if you spend your entire time in White Mage and then decide that that character is now going to be a ninja? They're definitely not going to function as well as a character that's been leveled in more physically appropriate classes, but it'll still be something that you can work with. It won't be great, but you can do it. And the reason you can do it is because every job does have its own set of base stats that are applied when you change to that job. You always have a little bit of a stable floor to work from, and then you can build on that by using the appropriate gear. I know there's going to be some actuallys in the comments and everything, but trust me, if you're coming over to FFT from other games where growth rates are a very important factor when you're considering how it is you're going to be leveling characters up, don't worry about it too much here. Just keep your melee fighters, keep your mages, and you'll come out the other side just fine. With that said, we did also mention gear, so I should cover that very briefly as well. Each job has a different set of gear that it can equip, different types of weapons and different types of armor. And that's going to have an impact on how they're able to function, because some jobs are really good, but have really not great options for what type of gear they can use, so people will want to apply their abilities to other jobs, something we'll be talking about. For each job, I'll have a little banner across the bottom of the screen that shows exactly what type of gear that job can use, and of course it will come up in discussion of each of the jobs as well. So, with those two important factors handled, let's talk about the jobs themselves, shall we? Starting off here, we have the Humble Squire, one of your two starting jobs that you'll have available to you right from the jump in Final Fantasy Tactics, and the baseline, not only for your physical classes, even though that's where you're going to be promoting into things like Knight later on by going through Squire, but all of your jobs and characters in general, because this job is focused almost entirely on the fundamentals, thus the name of its ability, Fundaments. As your melee starting job, Squires are going to do pretty much exactly what you would expect them to do. They're going to equip swords, have basic cloth armor, and they're going to run at the enemy and try to hit them. They're a very simple job, and they're not one that you want to stay in for too long, only sticking around long enough to pick up some of their important abilities. The key options here are Focus for 300 JP, increasing one's own physical attack power for the duration of battle. This is is a great skill to use to be able to get extra XP and JP on turns where you're not otherwise doing anything, and it's also actually quite effective. A few rounds of focus casts before you hit an enemy will do a lot for your damage output on physically focused characters even into the late game. You do get Rush, which is just a basic attack that you can use to get a little bit of damage in on an enemy, prevent them from using a counterattack, potentially knock them back, which can be useful if you're trying to knock something off of a cliff, but not generally the most powerful option that you have. More importantly, though, is Throw Stone. Throw Stone is going to be the first ranged physical damage option you're going to have in the game, and I'll tell you right now, it's not great, but it is damage, and much like Focus, being able to at least throw a stone at something to deal a little bit of damage, get a little bit of XP, a little bit of JP, is going to do wonders for you over the course of the entire game. And again, sometimes you can knock a unit back, get it out of position, knock it off of a cliff, deal some more damage. It does have a little bit of versatility, but this one will start falling off as you get into the mid-game. Finally, for their active abilities, we do have Salve, which just removes poison, blindness, and silence from an adjacent unit. You're very, very rarely going to actually use this, because you're very rarely going to run into those status effects. Silence in particular is one that you will barely ever see, and poison and blindness are much more easily dealt with by a dedicated chemist, and are generally not that negatively impactful to begin with. As far as their reaction abilities are concerned, they have Counter Tackle, which is literally just rush, but when you get hit. So it's not a bad option for a counter skill. It's actually pretty decent on monks because they get boosted damage with it. But realistically, this is just one that you're going to be getting rid of as soon as you have a better option for a specific build loadout. For support abilities, we do have quite a few here. However, there's only one that's really worth anything. Equip Axes is fine. Axes are a little bit better in the Ivalice Chronicles than they have been in the series history. They're still not great, and generally you want other support abilities than the ability to equip Axes. Beastmaster is unfortunately not very useful because of how limited it is in terms of its actual distance from the target, but if you're doing a build with monsters, then you can have this equipped to give those monsters some extra abilities, which can be decently powerful. Very niche, very specific. Evasive Stance is pretty much awful. There's really no reason that you're ever going to be using this instead of attacking or casting a spell. But then JP Boost. JP Boost. Increase the amount of JP and job XP earned in battle. This is, unfortunately, almost a necessity for every single character, so you can get new abilities and better jobs unlocked in any sort of a reasonable time frame. As such, the majority of your characters are going to be equipped with JP Boost until you get a full build online for them, and that means that every single character you have is going to be spending at least a little bit of time in Squire to get this. Following on to their movement abilities, we have Movement +1, which again is pretty much a must-have on everyone in the early game. Movement is key, especially with some jobs such as Knight that only have 3 move at baseline. Being able to get to your enemy faster or get away from the enemy faster is going to be very, very valuable, especially early on where boosts to movement are much more limited. These 2 skills alone guarantee that everyone is going to be in Squire for at least a little while, and they make the job extremely worthwhile, but as far as combat is concerned, you don't want to stick with it too long. Anything that Squire can do, other jobs like Knight will just do better in terms of actual combat. Get here for your abilities and then get out. Moving on from Squire to Chemist, the other of our 2 starting jobs, and a very nice one indeed. As you can see here, it is the beginning job for essentially your Mage tree, though the Chemist itself is not actually a magically oriented class. Instead, what it is, and as the name would imply, is a job that uses items to support allies on the battlefield. Potions, X-Potions, Ethers to restore MP, every single status restoration item under the sun, and perhaps most importantly, Phoenix Downs, to be able to res your allies when they get downed on the field of battle and keep them from permanently disappearing. Due to the static nature of the healing and support that items provide, chemists are literally always going to be a good option to be in. Again, they don't have great stat growths, as people are sure to point out in the comments, but that doesn't really matter because the healing that you do with your items is not dependent on your actual stats. So you're not really worried about how much damage or magical restoration you're going to be dealing. You're just going to have your flat numbers that are reliable. Chemists are also noteworthy for being the first class that you can acquire that has the ability to wield guns, which does also make them very useful, as guns are also pretty static in their damage, so they can just pick things off from a great distance, especially once you start getting magical guns like the blaster, deal actual decent chip damage to priority targets, and then huck items around like nobody's business, because they also have throw items inbuilt, which is a very, very handy thing to have. Your Chemist is going to be your battlefield healer, and you can absolutely use one through the entire course of the game. They have have good selections of armor due to the fact that they can use clothing and hair adornments. Their built-in traits with throw items and treasure hunter mean they're always going to have a role to be able to do something on the battlefield, and you're going to be spending time with them anyway to be able to get your mages online and to get some basic items to make sure that no one actually goes kaboom on the battlefield. As far as their abilities are concerned, the priority ones to pick up are going to be Potion and Phoenix Down in the early game for anyone who's going to be doing any supporting type role. You don't need to worry too much about most of the status restoration skills. If you do have a dedicated chemist that you're going to be using in that role, then obviously you'll pick these up over time, as well as the stronger potion options to keep up as your units wind up having more and more health. However, the option that a lot of characters are going to want, and one of the most powerful abilities in the game, is Auto Potion. This is a reaction skill that when hit with a percentage chance that's equal to your current bravery, so for Daisy here it would be 58% chance to trigger, you will use a potion automatically from your inventory on yourself to restore some of the damage dealt. At baseline, obviously you'll be using a base potion that only cures 30 HP, which in the early game is quite a bit, actually. But as time goes by, you can actually do a little bit of an interesting trick and get rid of all of the base and high potions in your inventory and have only X potions, which will mean that Auto Potion will automatically use a 150 HP heal on yourself each time you get hit, so long as your brave is high enough. And that can blunt, if not outright negate, a lot of damage in the game. This is an extremely powerful skill. It's one that any character that's going to be taking any sort of damage will be happy to have if they don't have a more specific build in mind. And again, it makes Chemist a very strong option to spend some time in. As far as your support abilities are concerned, it's a little bit more niche. Throw items is really only going to be worthwhile if you have a character that's going to be splitting their attention between some other job and Chemist, and you don't want them to be in Chemist while they're doing that job, since you have throw items naturally as a Chemist. But if, say, you have a Black Mage, you know, your Chemist moved on to the magical life and they're going to be throwing around spells, but you still want the ability to huck some items at people on the fly, then you can put throw items on so that they can fulfill that dual role. Safeguard is an option that just prevents your gear from being destroyed or stolen. Not usually something to be too concerned about, even when it does happen in a battle. And then Re-equip just allows you to change your gear in the middle of a battle, which is basically pointless, since again, any good battlefield commander is going to see what they need to have equipped before the battle begins. Finally, we have Treasure Hunter, and this is a very niche support ability that just allows you to find hidden gear when you're walking around on a battlefield. It's not super common that you're going to want to just have this equipped through normal gameplay, but there are certain maps, especially in the end game, where this is going to be an absolutely vital skill to have to get some of the best gear in the game. So keep it on hand for options like that, but don't worry about it too much as a general use case. Next up, we have the Knight, and this is going to be one of our first heavy damage dealers in the early game, and one of the tankier units going into the end game. Knights are a job that you unlock once you get to level 2 with a Squire alongside Archer, who we'll talk about in a moment, and are the first job in the game that's going to be able to use heavy armor, making them very tanky indeed. The Knight's battlefield role is to stand in the front, take hits, and dish out damage. As such, they've got great HP, they've got good physical attack. They're not really looking to cast any spells or anything, though you can do a little bit of like a white mage, paladin-y type build if you want, though it's definitely not going to be their primary role. The main ability set of the Knight is the Arts of War abilities, which is a very interesting one, as they're mainly focused around destroying enemy gear and reducing enemy stats, which can be extremely useful, if a little niche at times. Particular skills such as Rend Shield to make it harder for enemies to be able to block, or Rend Weapons that they do less damage or can't use certain types of abilities, are absolutely key players. And then options like Rend Speed and Rend Power to make enemies take less turns and deal less damage are also obviously quite good. Very often though, primarily you're just going to be running up and slapping things with a sword, and that's nice with Knight because they can wield not only basic swords, but also Knight swords, such as the legendary Chaos Blade, that tend to have very beneficial self buffs and deal a ton of damage as well. Knights do also naturally wield shields and plate armor. Plate armor, not the best in the late game because it doesn't have really good beneficial abilities on it, but it does just give a ton of HP to make you quite tanky. And then of course with shields, being able to parry and block, etc. will make Knights pretty hard to take down, especially if you build into it. Beyond the active abilities that you want to pick up from Knight, such as, again, Rend Shield, Rend Weapon, etc., they do have some pretty decent other options. Parry is okay for any sort of tanky build that wants to be able to block some enemy attacks, though there are better options later in the game. You have the ability to wield different types of gear with the Knight, which can be very fun. Being able to equip heavy armor to a squishy unit earlier in the game when your cloth doesn't really have like beneficial effects on it can make them quite tanky, but personally, I really like equipped shields and equipped swords. Just having the option to equip a shield on a unit that otherwise doesn't have great defensive ability will absolutely negate some damage as you proceed through the game and start taking hits, and equip swords could be a decent option as well, just give you some extra punch on something that already wants to be physically attacking, but maybe doesn't have access to better physical weapons. No movement abilities on the knight. It's a fairly simple job that will absolutely serve you well through the entirety of the game if you choose to use it. Is it the best? No, but it's good at what it does, and it can hold the line, and sometimes that's all you need. Next up, we have the Archer, and unlike a lot of other tactics games, Archers are not super great here, though they did get a bit of a buff in the Ivalice Chronicles. Archers obviously use bows and also crossbows, and can wield shields when they are using a crossbow, which is very fun. They have cloth armor, which, as we've stated, is very nice, and their primary ability is the aim skill. This was very, very bad in previous iterations of Final Fantasy Tactics, but it has gotten a lot better as the higher number aims have been reduced in terms of how long it takes them to cast. You see, what you do is you choose a target and choose a level of aim, and the higher the aim level, the more damage you will do once you do wind up firing off your attack, but it will also take you longer to cast that attack or to loose that arrow. As such, you need to play the balancing game of how much power you can eke out before the target moves, because if they move before you shoot, the attack will whiff and you'll have wasted your entire turn. Now that the speed for these higher level aim skills has been increased significantly, you can actually get quite a bit of damage out of the Archer. However, its actual weapons are not particularly powerful until you get some really endgame stuff, and the job itself isn't particularly great either, with fairly middling stats. It's got decent physical attack, but everything else is pretty average to low, so you'll find that your damage starts to fall off pretty quickly if you're not consistently able to land those aims. And aiming is all it does. It has no utility, it has no other special bonus effects. It's either shoot bow or shoot bow harder, and that's that. You can get some fun synergies with things like Knight, where you give the Archer Arts of War and shatter some gear from a distance. It can be a platform for utility like that, but the job itself isn't bringing that much to the table. That's reflected in its abilities as well. You do have the very strong Speed Surge as a reaction ability, pretty much the number one thing that you'll want from Archer if you're not doing some sort of like aim-focused charge build, because when you get hit, again, based on your bravery, this will trigger and give you more speed for the duration of the battle. And this can very quickly snowball if you can stay alive after taking enough hits, to the point that you're taking multiple turns per enemy turn, which is obviously very strong, but you're also in Archer, so you're not generally on the front line getting hit anyway. This is one that you'll want to pick up for your frontliners. Archer's Bane is pretty useless. It just gives you extra evasion against arrows and bolt attacks, which are not super common. Equipped crossbows is like fine. Crossbows aren't great. They're more of a utility piece to try and put status effects on things with their attacks, but they're pretty meh. Concentration is actually pretty decent, as it allows you to ignore targets' physical evade, making it so that you can actually hit them with attacks against certain types of enemies, especially on Tactician mode. This can be useful, but there's other ways of getting guaranteed damage in as well, so it's a little give or take. And then jump +1, generally not what you're worried about. There's not that many instances where you have huge height differentials that you need to circumnavigate. It's more just about moving directly towards the enemy or around otherwise unnavigable obstacles and being able to hit them in the face with a sword. So not the most useful thing. Archer, not the most useful job, but if you do want to make the most of it, giving it a powerful bow, having aim, and then something like Arts of War to rend enemy stats for some utility will allow you to at least deal damage and help the team out a bit, especially since it's been buffed. Next up, we have Monk, here represented by the man himself, Ramza, because it's the class that most people wind up putting him into. Monks are your frontline physical damage kings, while also having really good support utility. You can get monks by getting your knights to level 3, and they have extremely strong stats. Very, very high HP, very high speed, very high physical attack. These guys do one thing, and they do it very well. However, to make up for that, they're a little bit limited in terms of what equipment they can use. They have no weapons, because their fists are weapons. They cannot use any sort of headgear except for basic accessories, which can be useful because those are very good at negating status effects, but it also takes a while before you get any, and the stats they provide are not great. And then just cloth and accessories. As such, while the base stats are very strong on Monk, they can wind up being a little bit squishier than you would expect, but fortunately, they have a suite of abilities that makes up for that. Monks are notable for their inbuilt Brawler skill, which is also a skill that they can use to teach other units how to essentially be a monk, which massively boosts the amount of damage that they deal with unarmed attacks, as well as certain other attacks like Rush from the Squire's Fundament skills. It also boosts the effectiveness of all of the other abilities that Monk has, and they have a lot of very strong options. Cyclone is basically a little bit of a nothing burger, though. It's got very poor range due to having no vertical ability to hit whatsoever, and the damage it deals is pretty poor. You just spin in an area and deal some damage to everything around you. Pummel is an interesting one as it does random damage in front of you. Sometimes you can spike really high and absolutely nuke something. Sometimes you can do basically nothing. However, beyond those is when we start to get into very interesting options. Aura Blast is just a ranged punch up to 3 tiles away, which is very, very powerful, as I'm sure you can imagine. Just being able to punch stuff when you're not even in punching range is awesome. And Shockwave is basically that, but more, hitting an entire row of 8 tiles in a cardinal direction, dealing earth damage, and a lot of it at that. Get a bunch of enemies in a row and Shockwave them, and you'll be able to chunk off hundreds of damage by the end game across the entire enemy team. Very nice. Doom Fist is an option for enemies that are particularly tough. You can put a Doom counter on them so that they will just expire in a couple of turns. Not the most useful in a lot of cases because you could just like punch them and kill them, but when it's useful, it is very nice. And then you actually have some healing and support abilities, which is not something you see super often. Purification allowing you to remove status ailments from yourself and adjacent allies, which can be very strong. Chakra, which is huge, restoring HP and MP to yourself and adjacent units, and that can be quite a bit of both, allowing you to keep your frontline fighters and your mages fueled up. And then Revive, allowing you to just get an ally up, just straight up. No Phoenix down required. It does need to be melee range, but as I'm sure you can imagine, this is extremely, extremely powerful. As far as your reaction abilities are concerned, Critical Recover HP is pretty niche, as you need to actually get down to critical condition, which is less than 10% HP, and then if it triggers, you'll get a full heal. Very not reliable, because it's like, okay, what if you get burst down from above that and you just die? Like, then this does nothing. Counter, however, is a very nice option, as it just allows you to slap back whenever you get attacked, which obviously free damage is good damage. And then First Strike is an interesting option against particular types of enemies, as it says here, human units, as it preempts and then counterattacks. So basically, if someone tries to swing at you with, say, a sword, you knock it out of the way and then punch them in the jaw. So you take no damage and they take a lot of damage. Doesn't work against monsters, other special abilities, magic, yada yada yada, but in the right circumstances, it can be extremely strong. Now we're leaving behind our physical jobs for a moment here to start talking about the mages, starting off with the White Mage. Anyone who knows Final Fantasy knows exactly what White Mages do. They heal people. That's their whole shtick. Doesn't get much fancier than that. They can do a little bit of support options as well. It's not a combat class. They've got really good MP, they've actually got good speed as well, which is nice, and okay magic attack, but everything else is pretty middling. They're able to use staves, which are generally not super powerful. You do get the Mage's Staff that gives you extra magic attacks. Some of these have special effects such as that, but really not what you're worried about here. But what weapon you're wielding is not really what you're worried about with these guys. They then have your standard array of cloth, armor, and robes, the robes being very strong options that give a lot of different beneficial effects, such as extra magic attack or resisting certain types of elements, and same thing with both the mage hats and the robes having all sorts of different beneficial effects and boosting MP quite significantly, so you can throw around a lot of extra spells. Cloth armor generally still better for its utility, but you need that MP, and you can do some fun synergies with some of the resistances and elements that the robes absorb. As far as the actual abilities that White Mage has, it's a White Mage. They cast healing magic. They can cast magic that resurrects you. They can give you buffs, such as re-raise, so when you get down, you get back up. Healing restoration over time, defense and magic defense buffs, and then every once in a while, they can cast a Holy Nova on someone and blow them up. You know, just for a little bit of spice, right? Generally speaking, a White Mage is just going to be a support unit, but if you want to go in with Holy, it can deal quite a bit of damage. For your other abilities, nothing too fancy here. Regenerate just makes it so you get regen when you get hit, which, like, can help, but generally, if you're worried about healing on a reaction ability, you're just going for Auto Potion anyway, which is the same JP cost, and you can get it earlier, so, like, eh. And then magic defense boost in certain situations can obviously be very nice. If you're facing a large squad of enemy mages, slapping magic defense boost on a bunch of people will blunt their damage significantly, but again, that's very use case dependent and it's quite expensive, so it's probably not going to be the first thing that you're going to be springing for. Overall, White Mage is a little bit of a boring unit. You go to level 2 in Chemist to unlock it alongside Black Mage, which we're going to talk about in a second. That gets a lot more exciting, but if you want some ranged magic utility, White Mage can certainly get the job done for you. Moving swiftly along, though, to Black Mage, the much more exciting older brother. This is where things start to get very, very fun. Again, if you know Final Fantasy, Black Mage, you know what it does. It casts black magic, and it blows stuff up, and it casts it in various different flavors of elements, which is fun. They have the same equipment options as White Mages, with the only difference being that they use rods instead of staves, and rods generally more useful as they either give you big boosts to your magic attack, or they buff specific elements so you can flavor your Black Mage to be a specialist in a particular type of magic, which can be very useful because there's a lot of elemental resistances and weaknesses and synergies in FFT that people don't often know about. As you would expect, the Black Mages basically just want to be blowing stuff up as much as possible with magic, and they're very much suited to do so, with very good MP and absolutely stellar magic attack, and not a whole lot else to write home about in terms of their stats. For abilities, again, it's exactly what you would expect. You have Fire, Fyra, Fyraga, Fyraja, Thunder, Thundara, Thundaga, Thundaya, Blizzard, Blizzara, Blizzaga, Blizzaya, and then a couple more interesting options, such as Poison, to be able to deal some damage over time. Toad, to be able to turn a unit into the Toad, which is devastatingly powerful because unless they get cured from it from outside, there's nothing they can do about it, and they're basically defenseless. You can just kill something outright, not the most accurate, but very fun when you can make it happen. And then, of course, Flare for when you just need to push the nuke button. Generally speaking, 99% of your time with Black Mage is going to be spent casting various flavors of basic spells based on what elemental resistances and weaknesses are currently on the field. Fighting goblins, cast Blizzard magic. In a bright sunny desert, cast Fire magic. Is it thunderstorming? Cast Thunder magic. You kind of get where this is going. The rest of the suite of abilities Black Mage has is very limited, but basically just does more of the same. Magic Counter just makes it so that you can automatically counterattack with a spell that was cast on you against the target, which can be very funny. Again, little niche, much like Magic Defense Boost, and it's very expensive, so not super utilized, but an option. And then Magic Boost, which just increases your unit's magical attack power. Again, do you want to blow things up with magic? Black Mage is where you want to be. And once you've gotten all the abilities online that you want and you don't need JP Boost anymore, you slap Magic Boost on there and you just keep going to town. No movement abilities here, but that's fine. Black Mage is a very self-contained and self-sufficient package. As long as you have enough MP and you're smart about what spells you're casting when, it'll go the distance for you, and make no mistake. However, we're not done with mages, not by a long shot. Next up, we have to talk about Time Mage. Time Mages are definitely an interesting one, as they kind of are a blend between not really damage, but kind of damage, and like more support, but like by letting people do more things and disabling the enemy. They're very interesting. You get to Time Mage by getting level 3 in Black Mage, and they have sort of similar stat spreads. Still very good MP and magic attack, okay speed, but very poor everything else, pretty much just like Black Mage, and they have a similar set of gear. However, they swap the rods to go back to staves from White Mage. The big draw here is all of the unique capabilities of time magic. Options like haste are going to increase the speed of all allies who are hit by it, which is obviously extremely strong. Taking more turns than the enemy just means dealing more damage and disabling them faster. Conversely, you can go on the flip side. If there's a big chunk of enemies, you can cast slow on them to get basically the same effect, or you can double down and get haste and slow going, and oh, that is a good time. You can use stop to keep an enemy from doing literally anything, which is very powerful for priority targets. Immobilize to lock down various different melee enemies or keep mages in place so you can go and beat them up. More niche options like float and reflect, not super useful most of the time. Float just allows you to like go over rough terrain and like circumnavigate certain things, not super useful. Reflect does make it so that you can bounce spells back at things, although actually reliably hitting stuff with the bounce is a little bit of a different story. Quick allows you to immediately move a unit's turn to next in the queue, which can be very good for some wombo combos, but it also then means that their next turn won't come around for way longer, so you got to think about that. And then you have some damage options with Gravity and Graviga that just deal a portion of unit damage. Very good boss killing options here. And then Meteor, which has an absolutely massive area of effect. Was quite slow to cast back in the day, but it's been made significantly faster. Takes a ton of MP, but again, if you need to be able to hit the delete everything button, dropping a Meteor on it is a pretty good way to go about it. For your other options, Time Mage has Critical Quick and Mana Shield. Critical Quick is literally what we just talked about with the quick spell, but it happens on you if you get knocked down to critical HP. Again, not super great like we talked about with Critical Recover HP in Monk, because if you just missed that threshold, then like, congratulations, you've wasted an entire reaction slot. Mana Shield, however, just makes it so any damage you take is applied to your MP before your HP, and this can be an extremely powerful option for melee builds. Obviously not generally something that you want on your actual mages, because they want to be using that MP to, like, cast, but this is a nice option to pick up for other jobs, use as a defensive piece, and utilize a resource that they're probably not utilizing in any other way with their MP. Swift Spell is a very nice option that just reduces the time it takes to charge and cast magic spells. Pretty much any mage would be happy to have this for the most part. It is very expensive, and you do miss out on magic attack up if you're doing a damaging class, but yeah, more spells better than slower spells that are more powerful. Depends on the use case. Finally, you get Teleport, that just allows you to literally teleport. The further you try to move, the more likely it will be to fail, so you do still have some limitations on you, but terrain be gone. No worries about where enemies are, no worries about height, no worries about nothing. Just decide that you'll be there, and most of the time, maybe, it'll work. Levitate, on the other hand, just gives you the permanent effect of float, which, as we talked about, not super useful. A couple of niche cases here, but like, there's generally going to be better movement options available for you. Moving on to our last mage, for now, we have summoners, and summoners are a very, very fun time. They use the same types of gear as time mages and white mages, and their most notable ability is summon. However, to get to summoner, you will need to go through level 3 of time mage, so it takes a little while to get there. Once you do, however, some very fun options open up for you. Kind of think of summoners as a blending of black mages and white mages, but with a much bigger area of effect that they target for an equally higher MP cost and generally slower cast times when you start getting up to some of the bigger summons. They've got, again, phenomenal MP and magic attack and pretty poor everything else, much like black mages, and the suite of options that they have available makes them very versatile. You've got big AoE areas with every single spell that they have, and they can both protect and attack. Moogle gives a little bit of healing. Shiva, Ramu, Ifrit, and Titan are all basically like big versions of the various like Fire, or Thundara for their various elements. Shiva Ice, Ramu Lightning, Ifrit Fire, and Titan Earth, one of the few options that actually have Earth damage out there, which is cool to see. Then you have some other options as well, like Golem, that actually applies a shield to your entire party, equivalent to the max HP of the summoner, that will just block any incoming physical damage and prevent them from getting hit. This is actually a very strong option to deal with a lot of massed physical attacks and can make your entire team much, much tankier, especially if you have a dedicated summoner just casting it over and over again. Carbuncle puts Reflect on allies, we talked about, kind of niche. And then we get to some of the big damage options. Bahamut, Odin, Leviathan, and Salamander are all just very strong, massive AoE damage chunkers. Leviathan dealing water damage, again, very rare, and Salamander fire if you need some big AoE fire. Sylph is going to silence a group of enemies. If you've got a bunch of mages, again, you can do this, but like, may as well just blow them up, right? Fairy deals a lot more healing than Moogle does, which is nice in a big AoE. Lich deals dark damage, kind of equivalent to Gravity and Graviga from Time Mage, so it's going to be good at chunking proportionally large enemies. And then Cyclops and Zodiark, a secret ability, are again just giant damage options. By the end game, the majority of what you're going to be doing with Summoner is spamming the biggest, most powerful summon you can to just blow up huge groups of enemies. But the fact that it does have some utility options and can help to support the team, especially with dedicated things like Fairy and Golem builds, can make them a very versatile job that'll fit into pretty much any team. Our next few options here are a little bit more utility or specialty focused. Doesn't mean that they don't have a place, but they're not as clear-cut as some of the jobs we've been talking about up to this point, and we're starting off with Thief. Now, I mean, the game is in the name, right? It's a thief. What do you think it does? It steals stuff. And they have the stats that reflect that. They've got okay HP, pretty good speed, actually some of the highest speed in the game, okay physical attack, and then basically nothing in the way of any sort of magical capability. They use the normal array of leather, cloth, armor options, and then they use knives as their one and only specific weapon type, which is unfortunate because knives are not very good. Thief is not a combat class. You don't want to be on the front lines duking it out with a thief. If you're using a thief, it's either because you're min-maxing and you're trying to get a bunch of speed on a character by leveling through thief, or more likely, you're trying to steal stuff from the enemy. You get to Thief by progressing through Archer into Thief with level 3 Archer. You will need to do this to unlock a bunch of other very good jobs we'll talk about here in a minute, but primarily, you're looking at taking stuff from people. You have Steel Gill, which is functionally useless other than giving you XP and JP because you barely get any Gill from it. You get Steel Heart, which is actually a very nice option. Being able to charm units and temporarily turn them to your side is actually quite the strong utility piece, and something that I wish Thief had a little bit more of to make them a little bit more of a general use class, but unfortunately, not the world we live in. And then they have the entire array of different options for stealing gear. Helms, armor, shields, weapons, and accessories, and then also XP if you really want to get weird with it, but like really not super necessary. This is going to be what you want to have in your roster when you finally start running up on boss enemies that have really cool, semi-unique, or completely unique gear. Every single steel has a relatively low chance to hit with various different ways of being able to improve it, such as reducing enemy stats, boosting your own stats, speed in particular. Using Brawler, so you're better with your hands, is actually an option, as is attack boost. But yeah, I mean, if you see a cool piece of gear, it's going to be a thief or someone using steel who's going to want to get it for you. Now, the options that they have for their support and reaction abilities and stuff are actually semi-decent sometimes. Sticky Fingers is a fun one if you're fighting enemy ninjas, as it allows you to just grab the item that they throw at you and add it to your inventory, preventing the attack and also giving you free stuff. So when you're fighting ninjas, that's a cool one. Gill Snapper, if you want to get a little bit of extra money here and there. Again, not super needed since you get so much money from battles anyway, but it's there. And then Vigilance, if you get hit, you take Evasive Stance, which we already talked about with Defender, is not very good, but if you desperately need an option to try and boost your defense, I mean, it's there. Better to just have a reaction skill that does it without needing to get hit in the first place, but you know, what do I know? Poach, though, this is a very strong option for your kind of metagame army building, as you can poach monsters to then take their pelts to a poacher's den and get new, really good, sometimes, gear. I have a whole guide about this on the channel. I'll have the thumbnail and a link to it in the description in case you're looking to get into that, because it is kind of a whole side game in its own right to get some really cool, powerful gear early. Not something that you need to have on a Thief, but Thief does give it to you. The big one here, though, is, of course, movement +2, just like with Squire, and movement +1. More move range equals easier time getting into combat with enemies, dealing damage faster, or being able to escape if you find yourself in a bad situation. Having just even more on your movement slot is great, and it's a reason that a lot of characters are going to want to dip into Thief, even if just to grab this. Next up, we have the much-discussed Mediator. Also have a video about this job on the channel, because boy howdy. Mediators are one of the more unique jobs in the game, and they do some fun stuff, specifically based around using Speechcraft to eke out different effects, and potentially even turn enemies to your side permanently. Now, part of what makes Mediator so interesting is the equipment options that they have, as they can use knives and guns, similar to Chemists. And having the ability to use guns does mean that they're a viable damage option from a distance, while you're kind of playing around with all their Speechcraft skills. Beyond that, they've got the normal mage armor and like leather armor, cloth gear. Nothing too crazy there, but we do, of course, need to talk about Speechcraft itself. You'll be able to get to Orator by going through Mystic, something that we will talk about in just a moment. And note, this is the canon order that these things show up in, like, wikis and guides and stuff. I don't know why Orator comes before Mystic, when Mystic is what you use to unlock Orator, but we're following the official stuff, so it is what it is. You have to get level 3 Mystic to unlock Orator, and then you get access to their suite of very strange skills. Entice is one of the primary reasons you're going to want a Mediator, as it can just straight up make an enemy betray their team and join you permanently. They become an AI-controlled ally for the fight, and then you can recruit them permanently afterwards, whether you want the unit, whether you want their gear. This is very nice. The issue, it has a very low chance to hit, even if you really lean into things that can boost that chance to hit. If you are planning to use it, it can be very powerful once you can finally get it to pop off. Stall is another interesting one. It resets a distant unit's CT to 0, so kind of like hitting them with a slow effect. It's like the opposite of quick, basically. Just you're about to take your turn. No, you're not. If it hits. That's going to be the big issue with Mediator through all of these, if the effect actually lands. Praise, Intimidate, Preach, and Enlighten are some of your only ways to permanently manipulate Bravery and Faith. Again, I have a video about that on the channel as well. This is a meta progression sort of thing, not something you're really doing over and over in combat to get a big boost, but Praise allows you to increase your Brave, which affects how like your reaction abilities activate and the damage of certain attacks, whereas Intimidate reduces the Brave of the enemy and is more powerful. It reduces it by a much greater amount than Praise raises it, so you do have that as a combat option. And Preach is the same thing for Faith, which is going to boost and reduce the amount of damage that you're being given or taken or providing or anything to do with magic damage. This is going to be impacting that most of the time. Condemn allows you to put Doom on a target, which again can be a way to just guaranteed in a few turns a big scary thing is going to die. Defraud just like takes Gil from people. We talked about this with Thief. It's not necessary. Insult inflicts Berserk. This is actually kind of a sleeper option, I do believe. When people talk about Mediator, they don't really bring up Insult enough. But if there's like a scary caster, and you can put Berserk on them so they can't cast anymore and they just run up and try to hit you with a stick, that's pretty strong. That is pretty strong. Oftentimes, you'll just be able to blow them up outright, but when you can't, this is a good choice. And then Mimic Darlavan, which is one of the more powerful abilities a Mediator has, inflicting sleep on an AoE area of enemies. This could be very good if you can get it to land. Sleeping enemies are extremely vulnerable, and the fact that it casts instantly and can hit a group, very strong. Very nice there. You then have the Earplugs reaction ability, which is quite literally useless, as for 99.9% of your time playing this game, you are never going to encounter an enemy orator, let alone one that's successfully or accurately using its speechcraft skills, and this is all that block, so... But then, we have some very nice support abilities. Equip guns. Would you like firearms on any character? Ooh, I think you would. Mages with guns is a great time. Other types of support characters with guns is a great time. This is a very nice build crafting option. You then get Tame and Beast Tongue. Tame is great as it basically allows you to recruit monsters the same way, sort of, that you would recruit enemies with Entice, and monsters are very good, especially if you're going down the poaching route. They do have a lot of combat options, especially things like dragons and hydras that can make them very powerful, and Beast Tongue just allows you to use your speechcraft abilities on monsters, because obviously they don't speak English or Japanese or whatever your language of choice may be. No movement abilities here. Mediator is definitely a meta progression job, not generally one that you want to be using for primary combat, though it does have a couple of options for that if you so choose. But it's more about making your overall army stronger over the course of a long period of time. Its order stats are garbage. They are mediocre to bad across the board, except for some kind of okay speed. Okay, moving on. Mystic is kind of like Time Mage in that it's not really doing much with direct damage, but instead spreading around a lot of status effects to support your team and to debuff the enemy. But this time, rather than manipulating like speed and time and reducing HP by set amounts, you're spreading around your more standard Final Fantasy status effects. Mystics come with a pretty solid array of stats, all things considered. Their HP isn't the best, but they do have good MP, okay speed, and very nice magic attack, which is good. And they actually are the first job that we've seen that has the ability to equip poles, which are a very slept on option. They also, of course, have your normal like wizard clothing and regular cloth armor and all that type of stuff. And they can equip normal rods, staves. They're very versatile in that regard, which is nice for build crafting. However, the poles are interesting because they're like lances. They can attack from a 2 range, and they scale off of your magic attack rather than your physical attack, meaning that you can actually hit quite hard if you scale your magic attack quite high on a Mystic. This allows the Mystic to have a little bit of a dual combat role, getting in there, slapping enemies around, doing a bunch of damage, and then casting debuffs either before or after they've dispatched that enemy. And those debuffs are no joke either. After you hit level 3 with White Mage and turn yourself into a Mystic, you're going to have an array of different ways to mess with the opponent and also buff your allies a little bit. Everything from blindness with Umbra to absorption of MP to keep yourself operational and really give the enemy mages a bit of a hard time. Invigoration to absorb HP to keep yourself alive and deal actually quite proportionally high damage to things like bosses. Belief and Disbelief, granting the Faith and Atheist statuses to really mess with magic damage output. Corruption can make units undead and prevent them from being healed. Quiescence can silence things. Fervor can berserk. Predation reduces Brave. Delirium inflicts confusion. On and on it goes until you get to some of the best options here with Hesitation that puts Disable on a group of enemy units, which just makes it so they can't take any actions. Obviously phenomenal. Repose, which puts them to sleep and makes them completely vulnerable. And for when you need to go all out, just this once, Master, Induration to just turn them to stone, which, unless there's a gold needle or someone with a Suna around, is literally just an insta-kill. Because they will be turned to stone forever. Mystic is a very slept-on job, in my opinion, with its dual roles of damage output and enemy control, and that's where we even get into some of its support abilities, which granted aren't the best, but they do still give you some options. You have Absorb MP. When hit by magic, you just recover MP equal to the amount that was used to cast the spell. Little niche, but again, it can be a good way to fuel up, especially if you're throwing around a lot of big spells like Induration. Defense Boost is just generically good. Just take less damage against physical attacks. And the majority of what you're going to be getting hit by in this game is physical attacks. So just saying, I'd like to take less, please, is always strong. And then you have Ignore Weather, which is fine, allows the unit to move unimpeded through terrain affected by rainfall, such as marshes, swamps, and poisonous fens. Very rare this is going to be useful for you. It could be a pivot piece, maybe, if you want to have it unlocked on someone, and you're like, oh, well, this looks like a map this would be useful for. The much more valuable option here is Mana Font. Recovers MP upon moving. So this is very nice, as it just allows you to passively recover your MP as you move around. Combos really well with things like MP Shield, so you're just taking less damage and then recovering the MP to continue to take less damage. And also just good for any mage that has MP problems. Like, cool, just get some more by moving around. Sounds good to me. Mystic is a very fun class. It's a close combat class that can do a bunch of buffing and debuffing. I highly recommend it. Speaking of other slept-on jobs, we need to move on now to one of my favorite jobs, the Geomancer, here represented by Rhea. Geomancer is, again, a melee, but also caster kind of job, but instead of going for direct debuffs, we're doing long-range damage with the possibility of debuffs. You get into Geomancer by proceeding through level 4 Monk, and you're going to need it for a lot of other jobs, so do keep that in mind, and it is able to use a kind of eclectic mix of gear. You've got swords, axes, and shields, which is very interesting and does give you a lot of close-range combat options, and then cloth armor and also mage armor. So you can go very combat heavy or much more magic damage heavy, and that's great because Geomancer kind of wants to do both. You see, with its Geomancy set of skills, you have a bunch of different, some elemental, some non-elemental damage options to hit enemies at long range, and the ability that's used depends on what terrain you're currently standing on. For example, Tanglevine, probably the one that you would be using the most, triggers when you're standing on grassland, underbrush, or Tanglevine, so basically grassy stuff. It can hit enemies in a plus-shaped formation up to 5 tiles away, and has the option to inflict stop. This is what makes Geomancy so interesting. It gives you some elemental damage options that are a little bit harder to find sometimes, wind, earth, water, and it doesn't deal a ton of damage, but it deals enough, especially if you scale your magic, and you can just start putting free status effects on things, and these are all generally quite good. Like, just immobilize, make it so they can't move. Toad, so they basically can't do anything and are just a frog. Stop, stone, confusion, disable, sleep, doom, blindness, silence, slow, instant death. You can kind of see how this can get really good, and if you're hitting at range, for free, instant casting, by the way, in a group, you'll get these effects to trigger more than you would expect. And then once you get into close combat, you can start swinging with the sword as well. They've got very good stats across the board. Everything is above average or higher. Good HP, good MP, good speed, very nice physical attack, and good magical attack. Geomancer is very much a jack of all trades, kind of master of none job, but if you lean into what they do, they can be extremely, extremely effective. As far as their other support abilities and the like are concerned, Nature's Wrath is a very fun one. It's just a counter, but you counter with Geomancy, which again, more opportunities to put those status effects on things, which is very good. Attack Boost, increase the unit's physical attack power. Remember we talked about Magic Boost and how that's great for any mage that wants to be dealing damage? Well, say hello to the physical attack option. This is going to get used on a lot of characters. And then the movement options are pretty niche. They're mainly just for the Geomancer itself. Ignore Terrain allows you to just move around no matter what sort of movement limiting options you would have that you're currently trying to navigate through. And Lava Walking allows you to stand on lava, which is a very niche case. There's very few maps with lava, but if you want to use Magma Surge, you best have it equipped. Geomancer is a very fun option. I highly recommend it if you're looking at a little bit of a more unorthodox job that can do a bit of everything. It's very fun to use. Now, though, we're getting into the big boys, the real end game jobs that are going to be the end goal for a lot of different characters, and some of the favorite jobs of most of the community, starting off with Dragoon. Dragoon is basically your upgraded knight, and this is where many knights are going to wind up going and staying near the end of the game. You access Dragoon by getting level 4 Thief, not too terrible to try to do, even though it doesn't quite synergize with your path for Knight, and they have all the equipment that you would expect. They use lances, which is, kind of key to the whole Dragoon aesthetic, and then your standard array of shields, pole arms. They can use mage armor. If you so choose, much like knights. Less of a reason to do that here, though, and their primary skill is jump. They've got very nice stats for what they do. Good HP, okay speed, good physical attack, really nothing in the way of magic. Again, shocker. And while limited, the jump skill can be quite nice. It's kind of reminiscent of Archer's aim in a way, where you'll use a jump on a far off target and literally leave the battlefield, coming down on their head a little while later to do a big chunk of damage. If the target moves before your attack lands, then you lose the attack. Again, much like aim. But if you're able to land it, you're usually able to do a huge chunk of damage, if not outright down them immediately with your gigantic armored Goomba Stomp. The various different upgrades for jump just increase the horizontal and vertical distance that you were able to go. Very simple. It's a very straightforward job, but it's very good at what it does, both frontline fighting and, in a way, sniping off priority backline targets. The other abilities that it has are pretty nice as well. Dragonheart just gives you revive when you get hit. So, like, you get hit, it activates, cool. If you get down, you're just going to get back up again. It doesn't heal you to full HP, so like you can just get double tapped and kind of put you out that way, but still a good option to have. You have equipped polearms if you desperately want lances on someone. Not the most useful thing, but decent if you want to have a little bit of extra range on like a knight for some reason, not just have them be a dragoon. And then ignore elevation is actually a niche but very handy option, as it allows you to move to tiles of any height. So you don't need to worry about jump anymore. If you want to be able to be on top of those castle rampart walls, you can just go, my friend. And it can be pretty good to get some melee options directly into the fight when you would otherwise have to navigate a very tricky battlefield. Dragoon, relatively simple, very straightforward, but a very, very fun job to use. And if you can get the timing for jump figured out and get some good gear on them, they can be absolutely devastating against any sort of squishy target on the enemy team. Next up, we have the Samurai, and this is one of my personal favorite jobs in the game. A lot of people don't like it because of a weird aspect of its unique mechanic, but we'll talk about that in just a second. And I think those concerns are a little overblown anyway. So to get to Samurai, you are going to need quite a few things. This is pretty much going to be the theme of every other job that we talk about today. You need level 4 Knight, level 5 Monk, and level 2 Dragoon. So you're going to have to go pretty deep into both kind of sides of the physical job tree to be able to get this job unlocked. But once you do, you have a very potent option on your hands. These guys are basically spell swords in a way. As you can see, they wield katanas, shocker, and then they also have plate armor, or much like Dragoons and Knights, the ability to equip some robes and mage armor. Now, this is important because the primary skill that Samurai uses is Iaido, a ability to draw spirits out of their blades to deal damage and do different effects, and that does scale off of your magic attack. So even though you are a physical melee fighter, you also want to have good magic so that both sides of your kit are going to work. Now, unfortunately, the stats of Samurai aren't quite suited to that. They actually have fairly middling HP, better MP, which is weird because they don't use MP for their Iaido, but we'll talk about that. Quite solid speed, very good physical attack, and again, unfortunately, pretty mediocre magic attack. However, fortunately, there is a lot of equipment and different options that you can use to buff these guys up fairly considerably. And you'll want to because the abilities that they have are extremely strong. They start off basic, things like Ashura that just deals damage to enemies in an AoE around the Samurai, but it is a large AoE, and it's free to cast, and doesn't target your allies. So you can just throw yourself into the scrum with the Iaido up and just start nuking enemies in an AoE. No MP required, no charge time required, completely safe for your allies. And you have a bunch of different options for this. Kotetsu is literally the same thing, just stronger. Baizen Osafune is an MP version. So again, if there happens to be a large group of mages that you're not going to be able to clear before they start throwing big spells at you, you can drain their MP. Then we start getting interesting. Murasame heals allies. Exactly same area of effect, exactly same cost, which is basically nothing. And yes, I know some of you are screaming and typing. We'll talk about it in a second, but just heal your allies. And it's a pretty good heal. I know Murakumo, another big AoE damage attack, but this time also has the chance to inflict slow. Kiyomori, put protect and shell on all of your allies around you. Literally just Kiyomori and Murasame make Samurai one of the better healing and support jobs in the game, even if it is a little limited. Then, Muramasa. Same big AoE, even more scaling damage, can inflict confusion or doom. Kikuichi Manji, one of the only different area of effects, it's basically Shockwave from Monk, so you have a nice long range option. Masamune gives regen and haste to everything around you. And then the Shirajiridin, which just does a massive amount of damage in an AoE around you. You actually have quite the versatile set of skills here in Iaido. The issue, and yes, we will finally address it before we move on to our other abilities, is any of your swords that you use to trigger these skills have the potential to break when you use them, and you can't do anything about that. It's just a flat chance to have happen. Now, where I think people get confused with this is they think that the sword that they're going to have currently equipped is going to be the one that's going to break, and that is not the case. How you actually work with Samurai is you have a small supply of every katana that is currently available to you that fuels these different skills in your inventory, and just use them, and if they break, they break. Basically, just think of it like using potions or throwable bombs or whatever. They just happen to be swords. It's not a huge deal, and katanas can get expensive, but it's so easy to make money in FFT. If you want to get a samurai set up, it will not take long to have a good array of swords on hand for you. With this skill set, you can absolutely slaughter large groups of enemy troops or support your allies very heavily, and then you got some pretty cool support and movement abilities and the like as well. For our reaction abilities, we've got Bone Crusher. If the unit receives damage and is in critical condition, deals damage in return based on the unit's maximum HP. Attack range is determined by the equipped weapon. This is an interesting one. Again, it requires you to hit critical condition, which is generally not favorable, and it requires you having a bunch of HP, which is generally at baseline low for samurais, but you do have plate armor, meaning it's going to be a little bit easier to get down to that critical condition, and you will slap back hard if you do manage to pull it off. However, Bone Crusher rarely gets used because we have the strongest reaction ability in the game, except maybe Auto Potion, depending on what you're debating, but Shirahidori. When receiving a physical attack, the unit's parry rate is the same as its bravery value. You'll notice this samurai has 97 brave. That means that any physical attack that is parryable has a 3% chance to hit her. She will never be hit. Until it's like the single biggest attack that you absolutely need to parry, and then magically it gets through because, you know, RNG is an absolute bastard that way. But Shirahidori basically makes you invulnerable to physical attacks. Even if you have like 70 brave, it's like functionally immortal. It's insane. Extremely strong reaction ability. As far as your support abilities are concerned, you have equipped katana. Not generally something you're going to be using unless it's just like for flavor, because katanas are just swords if you're not using Iaido. But you do get double hand, allowing you to hold certain weapons with both hands, massively increasing their attack power. And this can actually do a lot of damage in certain scenarios, so good option to have. And then you have swim, allows the unit to swim through and even stop in deep water. Yippee. Very niche, very useless, don't worry about this, but you have so many other good abilities already in Samurai, it does not matter. If you are looking for a really cool mixed physical attacker and magical attacker that's able to handle large groups of enemies very quickly while also supporting your team, look no further than Samurai. It is a very strong option for you. Now though, we're getting on to what is, for many people, their favorite job in the game, and I totally understand why. Now it is time for us to talk about ninjas. Oh boy. Ninjas are tied with Monk for the single best physical attackers in the game, and the reason for that is they have an innate dual-wield ability, meaning that they can have a weapon in both hands, and both weapons deal full damage when they swing them. You just literally get a second attack with a second weapon, and boy howdy, that gets crazy. To unlock Ninja, you're going to need to go through a few different jobs once again. Level 4 Archer, Level 5 Thief, and Level 2 Geomancer. Not too terrible to get unlocked, but kind of unintuitive with Geomancer. You know, it is what it is. And when you do, oh boy, let's talk about stats here. So they don't have very good HP. Yeah, they're ninjas, shocker. They don't have any MP. They don't use magic. What they do have is the best speed in the game, I know, shocker, and some of the best physical attack in the game. The only two stats they really need to do exactly what it is that they want to do. Their personal combat ability is Throw, generally okay, it's just a nice option for some range. Basically, each throw option that you can learn, and they're all just like 100 or 120, very, very cheap, will give you the ability to throw that type of gear out of your inventory at an enemy, and it'll deal damage proportional to the damage of the thrown weapon. You also have two ninjas, or well, like specifically 4 ninjas, you could say, consumables that you're able to throw, shurikens and bombs. Just general damage options, not particularly powerful, but, you know, they're there. The big thing is having, like, big, scary knight swords that you don't need anymore and hucking them at things for huge chunks of damage. It gets very disgusting. It's very simple, but it's very good. As far as the gear that you're able to equip, you're using ninja blades here, which are generally fine. They're not the strongest thing around, but the most powerful purchasable one that you can get, the Spellbinder, near the end of the game, does have a chance of inflicting disable. And since you're hitting with it twice, that's 2 chances to activate it if you're using Spellbinders in each hand. Generally speaking, if a ninja's attacking something, that thing is probably going to be dead, or at least dead very soon. But if you don't finish them off and you disable them instead, well, then they're as good as dead anyway, right? Other than that, they have your standard array of leather armor, nothing crazy there. We've talked about that before. Now, for their support abilities, this is where Ninja really starts to shine. Vanish is pretty interesting. Upon receiving a physical attack, you just go invisible until your next action, which is like pretty alright, you know, just, okay, cool, we got slapped with a physical attack, you can't see me anymore. Okay, cool, yep, fair enough. Or Reflexes, upon receiving an attack, greatly increases physical and magical parry and evasion rates. What if instead of getting hit and going invisible, you just never get hit in the first place, right? Ineffective against certain attacks, yes, but the majority of the attacks in the game, especially if you have something like, oh, I don't know, a good cloak on that gives you massive evasion, then this is going to make it extremely hard for your ninja to be hit, especially if they're being attacked from the front. Reflex is a very, very strong option. That makes it so, even though their HP is pretty low, ninjas can still be extremely durable. Then you have the all-powerful dual wield. This is probably, after like JP boost, the most sought-after support ability in the game. Just give anything the ability to wield 2 weapons. You want extra magic attack on your mages? Have them dual wield and give them 2 rods that increase magic attack. Want to hit twice as hard with your knight who's already wielding a knight sword? Well, give him dual wield. Now you can dual wield claymores. Want to have a monk physically rip things in half with its bare hands? Well, let him do it twice in a row by letting him punch twice. It's insane. Dual wield is so wildly over-the-top busted, and it is awesome. Pretty much anything that ever wants to be attacking physically, and a lot of particular, like, focused builds want dual wield to hit their maximum potential. Finally, we get water walking, allows the unit to move across and even stop on the surface of water. This can be handy in certain maps, I'm not going to lie, but the majority of the time, it's just not going to be as useful as having more movement in general, so it doesn't really get taken. Ninja at baseline is just insane. You could literally make someone a ninja, give them the best dual-wielded swords that you have, hell, maybe give them equipped swords from Knight, or Brawler from Monk, or whatever, and never learn another ability on them. Just run around, dual attack things, watch them explode, repeat. That's all you need. Ninja is insanely busted, and that's before you even get into some of the other little bits of utility and fun stuff that it has going on with, like, throw. Absolutely insane job. It is the endpoint for most physically oriented characters. We're down to our last 3, kind of 4. We'll talk about that in just a second here, and I've realized I've gone out of official order, so we're going to swap Twilight over here. We have to talk about Arithmatician. I want to talk about the ultimate endpoint for physical units, being a lot of times ninja. Well, this is the ultimate endpoint for mages. Arithmatician is the single most busted job in the game that isn't a unique job. And even then, you can make an argument that it's stronger than all the unique jobs as well. When you unlock Arithmatician, it looks you in the eye, and it asks, would you like to turn on God mode? And the answer, of course, is yes. So what does it do, and how do you get it? Well, first of all, to unlock Arithmatician, you need a lot of different jobs. Level 5 White Mage, Level 5 Black Mage, Level 4 Mystic, and Level 4 Time Mage. Once you get all that going on, you're going to be like, damn, what the heck am I going to do with all this power? Well, fortunately for you, every spell that you just learned from all those different jobs is also usable by your Arithmatician. Well, that's very handy. I mean, now I don't have to worry about having all of my abilities split between, like, okay, well, yeah, I can have, like, white magic and black magic, but then I won't have mysticism or time magic or whatever. I can just have them all in one. That's already really powerful. It is. What if I told you that there's no cast time and no MP recharge required? That's where we're getting to here with Arithmatician. First off, their stats and their gear, though. Their gear is basically the same as Mystic, although you definitely do not want to be in melee combat with these guys. I'll tell you that right now. Functionally, all you're ever going to really do is give them the most stuff that they can have that boosts their magic attack. They are stuck with poles, though, unfortunately, so you can't give them, like, rods or anything, but it is what it is. And their stats are absolutely abysmal. Bad HP, bad MP, garbage speed, garbage physical attack, and bad magic attack. Well, all right. I mean, that seems like it's a way to balance whatever crazy nonsense you're talking about, right, Tom? And a little bit. The speed, maybe. That's about it, though. So how does arithmetics work? So, as you learn skills here, you'll get different targets and different ways to affect targets. For example, target experience by a multiple of 5. When you do this, you will then be able to select a spell. The spell that you select will hit every single target on the battlefield that has an amount of XP that can be divided or multiplied, however you want to think of it, by 5. Every single one, instantaneously, for no MP cost. Find the right combination of whatever target level that's a multiple of 4, and just the whole enemy team happens to have their level multiplied by 4. Well, you just cast Death on them, and yeah, you probably won't get all of them because it is only a % chance, but boy howdy, you'll probably get a couple of them for free, just instantly gone. Oh, what's that? Your team is a little beat up? Well, hopefully their elevation is visible by primes, and they all happen to be standing on like the same even plane. Just instantly cast Curaga on the whole party. Any spell that you have learned from Mystic, White Mage, Black Mage, and Time Mage can be cast using this arithmetics skill. And while yes, the job itself is pretty mediocre in terms of its stats, it's not going to deal a ton of damage, it's very slow, you could just learn all of these and then put them on any other mage. Put it on a Black Mage, suddenly you're not worried about how slow they are, how low their magic damage is. They will just nuke. It is insane, the combos that you can set up here. Arithmatician and Arithmetics are stupid busted. Then they have some interesting support abilities and stuff as well. Cup of Life. When HP is restored, it distributes any excess among all allies. Cool. Have this on anyone. Your Arithmatician, since you get it from them, sure. Use an elixir on them while they're down 2 HP. Well, I guess the excess is just going to go to everybody. And the excess is everything, because it's an elixir. You get more reasonable with it, too. Oh, you cast Curaga on them, they're missing 2 HP. It was like curing for 200. Well, she gets 2, and then everyone else gets 198 split between them. Very strange, very interesting. It's very, very powerful. And then Soulbind, upon receiving damage, deals half the damage in return and recover HP by the same amount. So you get slapped and then just blunt the damage by sucking the life off of the guy who hit you. It's insane. How about XP boost? Just increase the amount of XP you get in battle. Want a power level to 99? Well, here you go. This will make it faster. What about accrue XP and JP? You just want to get XP for moving around? What about JP so you can learn new abilities? You got them both here. It's... Arithmatician is, you got to the end of the game, you got a really powerful job unlock. Congratulations, you've now broken the game. Go have fun. It's a very fun job. Anyone who likes any sort of challenge or any sort of challenge run in this game does not use it because of exactly how busted it is, as we just described. It is a ton of fun, though, on your first time through, though. If you want to give it a shot, it'll be very fun once you kind of get the hang of it. Moving on, we have a little bit of an interesting dual split job here, represented here by Bard for the males, and then I believe Rhea, yes, is my dancer equivalent. So, move you down here, ma'am. Bard and dancer are two sides of the same coin. Bards are all about buffing the allies and restoring them. Dancers are all about debuffing the enemies and damaging them. And they have kind of similar aesthetics. Bards use instruments. Dancers use, well, knives, but then also silks. And, like, bags and stuff if you want. But bards are the support. Dancers are the offense. How do they work? So, basically, what bard and dancer do is you have songs or dances that you will cast, and then they will just go off repeatedly every few turns. And you can just sit there and do it forever without ever casting again. No input needed, no nothing. And they affect every single target on the battlefield simultaneously that class is meant to target. So again, like Bard targets your allies, Dancer targets your enemies. To unlock these, it's a little interesting. For Bard, you need to have level 5 Mediator and Summoner. For Dancer, you need to have level 5 Geomancer and Lancer. Again, one is magical and support, one is more offense and physical. And all their abilities do basically the same thing, it just switches targets. Bard is going to have things like Seraph Song to restore MP to all allies, Life's Anthem to restore HP, Rousing Melody to boost speed, Battle Chant to boost physical attack, Magical Refrain to boost magical attack, Nameless Song to give just various different beneficial statuses, and then Finale allows the next turn of all allies to come immediately. This is very slow to activate, but once it goes off, literally all of your guys take their turns simultaneously, which is pretty insane for like an alpha strike potential for sure. Dancer, on the other hand, has basically the opposite. Witch Hunt reduces MP, Mincing Minute does damage, Slow Dance reduces speed. Like, it's literally the opposite of what Bard had going on. Last Waltz reduces all enemies CT to 0. So now instead of your whole team going, the whole enemy team just stops going. You can kind of see the parallels here. They're the same job, but just with slight differences here and there. As far as stats are concerned, things get a little interesting. The Bard is actually, like, not great, unfortunately. Very bad HP, bad MP, not that they need it, because, like, their abilities don't cost anything. Okay speed, bad physical attack, but actually pretty decent magical attack, which is nice. Whereas Dancer is a little bit more utilitarian. Slightly better HP, again, still no MP, but then solid speed and very good physical attack and okay magic attack. So she's actually not a bad job to be in, to have a little bit of other options beyond just doing the dances. Dancer and Bard are very interesting from a team building standpoint, because by the time you get them, you pretty much have like a suite of characters already built up that are doing much more direct effects, so people tend to write them off. But just having a Bard to sit there and sing to your team over and over and over again, boosting their speed more and more and more, will just overwhelm the enemy before too long. Same thing with Dancer, just making it so that the enemy's speed or their physical attack or their magical attack is just dropping over the course of a fight is going to snowball into a victory for you fairly quickly if you can keep them safe. And seeing as how you can just use their ability and then run into a corner of the map where nobody's around and let them do their thing forever, I mean, it's just a cumulative win button, and it's pretty good as a result if you decide that you want to use one of them. However, now we have to talk about our final generic job for the video, and boy howdy, thank God, because it's been a long one. And this is by far the weirdest job that we have to talk about today. It's the Mime. God, how do we talk about mimes? So first of all, to unlock Mime, you need a lot of different things. You need level 8 Squire, level 8 Chemist, level 5 Geomancer, level 5 Mediator, level 5 Summoner, and level 5 Dragoon. So you need to be all over the dang place to unlock this thing. Its gear is none. No gear. Nothing. Can't do it. Sorry. Okay. You're probably thinking to yourself, what the heck's going on here? Abilities. None. Zilch. 0. They do come with innate concentration, brawler, and beastmaster. Curious. Very curious. But what does this do for them? What do? They have no abilities. They have no gear. Well, as you can see here, a warrior who has abandoned their own identity, the Mime's job command Mimic allows the actions of allies to be imitated automatically. So, basically what you're looking at here imitates ally actions automatically. Certain abilities cannot be mimicked. The way this works, when one of your other units uses an ability, and as I said here, certain abilities can't be mimicked, but the majority of them can, the Mime will, as the name says, immediately recreate that action. However, it recreates it with the exact specifics of the attack that were used by the previous unit. This means, say you have a dual-wielding ninja attacking an enemy, and you have your Mime next to another enemy. The Mime will then dual-wield attack that enemy. They are limited because they follow like the same exact direction and everything, so you have to be very brainy about how you get your whole Mime team set up. But essentially, you can just double down on any asterisk, any ability or attack in the game to massively inflate the amount of damage that you're dealing to things. And that's amplified by the fact that the base stats and growths of Mimes are extremely strong. Top tier HP, terrible MP, but that's fine because they don't need it. Top tier speed, very good physical attack and magical attack. Anything that they are mimicking, they're going to be good at. And that means that a smart player can just massively increase their damage output, their support options, and the like. You need to be very good at positioning and very careful about the timeline of who's going where and when to make sure your target doesn't scamper away before you're able to actually hit them. But if you know what you're doing with them, this can be devastating. And keep in mind, it's not something that happens on the Mime's turn. It happens on each of your other allies' turns. So functionally, a Mime can get 4 actions a battle round, if you want to think about it that way. You can imagine how that's going to get extremely nasty. One of my personal favorite uses for Mime, though, and something that you're seeing in the gameplay clip here, is just to get more stacks of bard songs and dances. Because now, you don't even need another dancer or bard. You have another one of both. So now you're just doubling up on all the status effects and debuffs that you're throwing around the battlefield, which makes that snowball happen even faster. It's very fun, and you don't have to worry about like positioning and stuff with that. You can just park the Mime next to the bard or next to the dancer, and they'll just keep doing the thing and multiplying it. It's very fun. It's a very weird job, but it's one of the more unique ones, and I really enjoy it for how much flavor it adds in a roster of jobs that are generally more standard for the Final Fantasy brand. And with that, we have successfully discussed every generic job in Final Fantasy Tactics, the Ivalice Chronicles. Again, not a particular deep dive on any one job, because there's a lot more that could be discussed with maximizing growths, in particular builds with combos of different abilities from other jobs, or different types of equipment that's going to really make a certain job or character pop. But you should now have a much better understanding of not only how to unlock these jobs, but what they do and how you can start applying them to your own teams on the battlefield in Ivalice. As always, if there's something that I got wrong or something that you feel needs to be corrected or something I didn't mention that you think is important to bring up, do please put all of that down in the comments below. I love making these videos. I love seeing the discussions that people have under them about builds and strategy and tactics. It's the reason we're all here, and I'm always happy to help give newer players or people who need a little bit of a refresher a push in the right direction. If you watched this long to the end of this very girthy video, thank you so very much for doing so. My name has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. I hope that you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there, everybody. And remember, be good to each other, y'all. Bye now.